Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you, and today I am going to answer the question for you: where are all of the new kick-ass heavy metal bands coming onto the scene? This is a question I get from time to time, and for whatever reason, over the last, I don't know, a couple of years, people have been asking me this. They call the show, they'll email me, whatever. So I'm going to answer this for you. And here's what I'm going to say. They are out there, but they are a lot harder to find. And let me be more specific. So for those of you that have been watching the channel for quite a while, there was a video I did. I called it, it was basically a brutally honest assessment of the music scene for heavy metal bands. The episode just came out a couple days ago, about probably 2-3 days ago now. And we talked about a lot of the obstacles that metal bands face today, as far as touring goes, getting merchandise printed, et cetera, et cetera. And I briefly touched on what I'm about to talk about in that video, but I did want to go into a little more depth on what is going on and why it's so hard to find a lot of these kick-ass new heavy metal bands. So let me first start off with something that's a little easier to understand for people and how things have changed. So back 25 years ago, on the average, when I would host my radio show, I would get, per month, you'd get 10, basically I would get 10 releases, about average, maybe 15, maybe 8. It would all depend. And that would be it. And I'd listen to these albums and I'd like about 5 of them. So, I liked about half of what was sent to me, 10 albums. I'd listen to them all. I liked about 5 of these records. And record labels, what they used to do is they used to pay publicists, aside from their own person that did publicity, and they'd pay them for 2-3 months to promote these records. I mean, they seriously would do that. Okay. Now, here's what happens. I get sent about 50 releases via email and all these electronic press kits, and I still only like about 5 records out of that 50. Because now, with the fact that recording is a lot easier and a lot cheaper, and anybody can pretty much record a record if they really want to, there is more stuff out there, but the quality of that stuff isn't really as great. So in other words, there's more quantity right now than quality. So there are still the same amount of really great bands coming out. However, they are harder to find because there's so much more saturation in the market. And then you have to also think about this. Record labels did not have as big of a roster of bands back, say, 20-25 years ago like they do now. And when you think about record labels and how they promote things, I can flat out tell you right now, everybody's doing more work there. They have the same amount of people doing more work, and they have to deal with more bands. And it's a lot easier for bands to basically fall through the cracks and kind of get overlooked. It happens because each of these labels have so many bands on the roster. Like when I open up my email, like today, for example, I opened up my email this morning from one record label. I had 15 emails of all these albums that have either just come out or are coming out very soon. Okay. This is with electronic press kits. That's one label. So keep in mind, back in the day, I would only get 10 records, 10 CDs, whatever you want to call it, per month. And one record label sent me 15 emails with 15 different albums in it. Okay. And they're paying publicists. Now, they will pay these publicists and push the record, maybe a month. It really all depends. But these publicists are not, number one, they're taking on more bands. And number two, they aren't really promoting these records as long as they used to. So what's happening is, not only from the standpoint of me getting more and more stuff that really isn't all that great, and it's kind of diluting everything, and it's a lot harder to sift through it and find the really good bands that are in there. But then record labels, because what's happening is they have too many bands to be able to promote all at once and really put that much energy into. It's almost like they're randomly throwing it at a wall and trying to make it stick. And that's what's happening. So a lot of people, your casual fan, sometimes doesn't know about some of these releases. Hell, there are albums that I absolutely love from 2022, and I didn't even know they came out. I ended up stumbling upon them because people, someone like myself and anybody else that does any kind of media is getting just all this stuff thrown at them at the same time, and it's almost impossible to keep up. There was no way possible for me to listen to all the stuff that gets sent to me every year. So it becomes harder to find those bands because the market is so diluted. Now the thing is too, what's really crazy is that you listen to some of these newer bands. Like, I get a lot of stuff that comes in and you're like, really? They're using the same guitar tone plugin as another band that just sent me a CD. And so let's say you get 40 albums, 45 albums that really are all that great. You have to really search them through those 50 albums to find the 5 that are really good and the 5 bands that are really good. So there's good stuff out there, folks. I mean, like I said, unfortunately, you have to look for it. You know what I do? I'll be honest with you. Word of mouth really works well for me. And I've been using that quite a bit to find a lot of new releases that have been coming out. The labels send me stuff. I get electronic press kits every single day. And there's so many labels. There's so many publicists. I can tell you the amount of publicist people that exist now, there wasn't even half that back in, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago. So needless to say, this is why it's a lot harder to find a lot of these bands that are really good, because there's so much stuff out there diluting everything that you have to sift through it, and it's a lot more work to do so. The average person doesn't want to do that. Me, because I do this show, I will do that. However, the average music fan with a short attention span, they aren't doing that. They're not going to really look for it. So what they end up doing is they end up going back to what they're comfortable with. And what ends up happening is they go back to the bands they've been following, and they go back to what they are comfortable with, and they're really not trying to search that stuff out either. So the word doesn't get out there as much as it should. And this is a big problem. Now, let's talk about something else. This is going to be an issue. And again, the video about the music industry, the episode I just recorded with Justin Roth and Sean Peck, understand that look at like 10 to 15 years in the future. Father Time there's an old saying in sports, right? Father Time is undefeated. How long is Iron Maiden going to stick around, right? And these guys are almost in their 70s. Black Sabbath and Ozzy, they've retired, right? Slayer retired. Tom Araya, his neck, has some kind of neck issue, so he can't play anymore. And as these guys age, right? As these guys age, folks, I'm going to tell you right now, these bands that are huge headliners that are playing these huge shows, they're going to be gone. Like, they aren't going to exist. So then who are going to be the next people that are going to be the headliners, right? So my thing is that it's very important to find these bands, or it's very important for labels to start taking some of these younger bands that are very good and really start concentrating a lot more on them. The legacy acts like Metallica and AC/DC and Iron Maiden, they don't need anybody's help for promotion. They sell themselves. Metallica put out Saint Anger and sold, I think it went platinum, which sounds like a bunch of demos and Lars hitting on a trash can. That's literally what it sounds like. And it went platinum, right? Sold 1 million copies of that thing. So these bands sell themselves. What needs to happen is the labels really need to start getting out and getting some of these younger, really awesome bands and start cultivating them. Start really developing their careers. Like, labels used to do that in the 70s. They used to do that they used to do that in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And even to an extent into the 90s. But when the downloading era came in, then it kind of stopped. The whole infrastructure of how records were delivered and distributed and promoted, that all went away. The capacity for labels to go and basically take large groups of people and move them in one direction. They lost that. And now, they're really just pumping money into these legacy acts who may not be around in 10 to 15 years. So just remember that. Who's going to be the next headliner of Wacken Open Air, for example? Like 15 years from now when some of these bands go away. And then the generation after, like the Iron Maidens and the Metallicas, like your Halloween, for example, or like Blind Guardian, or some of these other bands that really do, I mean, they can headline Wacken, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, these bands don't have a huge following in the US either. Not like Maiden, Priest, et cetera, et cetera. So something to think about. The bands are out there. The music is out there. We did a whole video of why bands have become discouraged. And I suggest you guys watch that. I will link that here in the show notes as well. But I did want to bring this up. I did want to tell everybody that there are great bands out there. Unfortunately, sadly, you have to search and you have to work hard to find them, but they are out there. So with that said, thanks for watching. Stay metal.